I'm going to show you how to create texture masks in Substance for your Goo Shader avatars. And then later on, we're going to be using them in the Goo Shader. We also have a tutorial on how to do this using Blender and a painting program such as Krita, in case you do not have access to Substance Painter. That video is available in the description. There are 4 steps to this process. First off, we have to set up the channels. Next up, we have to actually draw the masks. Then we have to export the masks as a texture. And lastly, we have to use those masks on the Goo Shader. So let's get started. I already have my avatar loaded here in Substance Painter. And the first thing that we're going to need to do is set up the channels. In the texture set settings window over here, if you don't have it, make sure you have it shown right here in window views, texture set setting. In this window right here, we're going to see our channels right here. I have the body material selected right now. We're going to be starting with the body for this, but you can start with anything you'd like to mask out first. So we're going to add a new channel by clicking this little plus button right here, going down to user channels right here, and then selecting one of these that's available. You're going to want to keep in mind which one you select. So I'm going to start with user 0 because that's the one that I'm not using right now. Now I'm going to double click on user 0 and I'm going to call it deform mask. Then I'm going to add user 0 to the end of it because we'll want to remember that this is the user 0 channel. And this mask is now going to be deformation mask. We're going to be using this, we're going to be deciding which parts of the mesh are going to be deforming and which aren't. Next up, we're going to set the type by clicking this little cog right here and set it to L8. So this will give us 8 bits of precision, which is plenty enough for this. And then I'm also going to add another user channel, user 1 in this case. Double click and rename it drip mask. Cog L8. Now that our channels are created, we can start painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to start off by drawing the deformation mask. So I'm going to add a new fill layer right here into the group. I'm also going to name the group deform masks. Now let's select that fill layer. Let's uncheck all of these by alt clicking on the deform mask. So only the deform mask is going to be selected now. And now, as you can see, we can change this value, but nothing's changing on the avatar because we're looking at the material itself. We need to be looking at the deform mask visualization. So we can go over onto this drop down here, scroll down into single channel and find deform mask user 0. And now we can change this value. The whole avatar will be this. So now you can just normally start painting your stuff. Like this doesn't necessarily have to be a fill layer, though you do want to decide on what you want to start off with. If you want to start out with a completely white avatar here, which means that every single piece of the avatar is going to be deforming, or with a completely black mask in this case, which means that none of the avatar parts are going to be deforming. In my case, I'm going to start with a completely white mask here, so everything's going to be deforming. I'm going to call this base. So I'm going to hide the fluff so we can actually just see the body here. Okay, and now we can start masking the avatar out. So for the deformation mask, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask out the head and the hands. Very simple. But instead of just drawing the head and the hands out, I'm going to be doing this procedurally. We're going to be drawing stuff out later on a little bit. And again, you don't have to do this. At this point, this is up to you how you want to do this. And feel free to skip this section completely. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off by adding a fill layer, adding a black mask to this, and then to the black mask, I'll add another fill, and then set this to be a cylindrical projection with a linear grayscale gradient right here. Make it only have the deform mask, set the black, and so what this will let us do now, select the gradient, is it'll let us move around this shape projection, crop the shape, and nearest filtering, so we avoid some graphical issues. This will let us pretty much move around the cylinder to decide where things are going to be shown, or well, which things are going to be masked out. So I'm going to kind of position this here. I'm going to tweak the balance to create the fall off. Yep. That's the head done. That was very easy. And now I'm going to copy and paste that. Set the blend mode to linear dodge, which means it's just going to add that value. And then I'm going to rotate that and move it over here onto the hand. Adjust the contrast a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Copy paste that again, and now I'm going to go into 3D projection settings. Invert the X, so flip it from being negative, and then invert the rotation to be minus 90. No, not minus 9, minus 90. There we go, so now it's perfectly flipped. And that's pretty much the deformation mask done for me. Now I'm going to do the dripping mask. So let's create a new folder again. Let's call it drip mask. Add a new fill layer to it. I'll click on drip mask. And let's set the view here to drip mask so we see what we're doing. And I want everything on the outer to be dripping by default. So we're going to start with white. Call this base. And now, in my case, I'm going to want to mask out the head, hands, the chest, the crotch, and the feet. For the head and hands, I'm actually just going to copy this over into the drip mask. So I'm going to copy over what we set up previously, but change out. We're going to change that out back to 0. There we go. And now we're going to add some extra gradients here for the feet. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. Now for the chest and crotch, I'm actually going to want to paint that. Now this is a bit hard to see where the chest and crotch are, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on wireframe and then display settings here. It's going to be all the way down here. Show mesh wireframe. There we go. So now we can see the mesh wireframe, and now we can add a new fill layer with a black mask. I'll click on drip mask, set that to black. Select a brush. I'm going to be using basic soft. And just paint out the chest. Just like that. Then I'm going to be also painting out the crotch here. Let's get a little bit of the tail as well. Okay, cool. Well, now let's re-enable the fluff. And you can see that the fluff hasn't actually been masked out. And I also want to mask out the fluff here so that these parts aren't dripping and deforming as well. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to be instantiating these masks over into the fluff. So let's go back to our texture settings and let's copy these channel names here and go back into the fluff, into the texture settings, and add those channels that we've added. So make sure that the names and the types match. All right. You're going to want to do this for whichever material you're going to be instantiating those on. Instantiation pretty much means that we're going to be kind of taking those layers in the body and mirroring them on the fluff as well, like a prefab instance in Unity. Now that we have those mask channels on the fluff, we're going to go back to body, right click on deform mask, instantiate across texture sets, and then we're going to select fluff. We're going to do the same thing on the drip mask as well. Instantiate across texture sets, fluff. Okay, now if we go to fluff, we'll see that we have an instance of deform masks and drip masks. And if we go to deform masks visualization right here, we can see that yes, it is in fact been instantiated. Same for the drip mask here. Now there's a little bit of odd jankiness here. There's going to be a hard edge here because of how the gradient that I've set up works, which maybe not have been the best idea, but we can kind of work around that by just adding back in the base here. In the fill layer, we can add filter and set it to be blur. That's the drip mask. Let's go back to deform mask. Yeah. So we can kind of work around that by adding a blur here. That should be fine. Now, of course, it's going to affect all of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy this whole thing and then delete the hands from it and then delete the head from the other one, set that to normal, right? So now we have this layer only has hands and this layer only has head. And I'm going to call this hands, head. You don't have to do these things. This is just for my specific avatar here. You can paint this however you like. And yeah, I'm gonna keep that. And I'm just gonna copy this over into the drip and then redo that. There we go. There we go. Okay, cool. So now that's it. Let's turn off wireframe. And now we can go ahead and export this into Unity. So to export this whole thing as a texture, I'm going to go into File, Export Textures. Make sure you've selected the materials that you have the masks on. So for my case, it's going to be body and fluff. Let's go to Output Templates and create a new template and call it Nova Beast Masks. Next up, we're going to be adding a R plus G plus B plus A output map. This just means that each channel of the texture is going to be something that we can individually assign to. The masks, the way they work is that they are a one-channel texture. They only go from black to white. It's not a color. Colors require 3 channels, whereas something that only goes from black to white requires only 1 channel. So we can pack 4 different masks into a single texture, and that's really good. Because we have 2 masks here, user 0 and user 1. User 0 is going to go into the R as a gray, and user 1 is going to go into the green as a gray. That just means it's grayscale data. It's not red, it's not green, it's not blue, it's not alpha data, it's grayscale data, right? And so now we're going to be exporting user 0 and user 1, and I'm just going to close this real quick, that's perfectly fine. If we remember how we set them up, user 0 is going to be the deformation mask, and user 1 is going to be the drip mask. So, going back into the output templates here, let's find our Nova Beast mask. Let's name this now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little $sign right here, and I'm going to say project underscore mesh underscore texture set. These are just going to be replaced with the project name, the mesh name, and the material name. You don't have to do this. You can name this whatever you want. We'll call this masks. I'm going to say R for deform, G for drip. So I kind of know what this is going to be when I'm going to be using this later on. Now we've made the template, but we need to actually export the textures with the template. So going back into settings, remember this little output template right here. Remember what it's set to, because you're going to want to remember this when next time you're editing your textures and you want to export those textures. You're going to be wanting to set this output template back to what it was. But for now, we're going to be clicking this and then finding the Nova Beast Masks thing that we just made. And now we're ready to export. So select your X output directory and let's click export. And voila. Now I'm going to be going into my output directory here and moving those textures into my project. So I'll meet you in Unity when I've moved all of my textures that I've just exported into Unity. Okay, we're back in Unity. And as you can see, we have our 2 textures that we've exported of the body and the fluff. They look pretty weird, but that's okay because they contain the special data that we need. So now, first things first, we're going to set this to not be an sRGB color. Press apply. sRGB is just pretty much a way of encoding data. And we're going to say that, hey, this is not actually color information. This is grayscale information. Okay, now let's start setting these textures up on the material. Let's start off with the body. I'm going to go to the body material, find the mask channels tab, enable one of the available texture mask slots. It doesn't have to be texture 1. It can be any one that's available that's not being used. I'm going to enable it and call it masks. Then drag the body mask into the mask texture. I'm going to take this opportunity to also name the red channel to be the deform mask and the green channel to be the drip mask. Now, if you preview the red channel, and now we can see that the red channel is the thing that we drew in Substance. The green channel is also what we drew in Substance. Let's start using this now. So let's go into our GUI right here and set the deformation mask to be texture, masks 1, deformation, dripping, texture, drip. There we go. Our hands are no longer dripping and deforming, and neither is the head. Now we need to also propagate this to the fluff here. So let's do the same thing here. Texture, enable that. Drag the fluff texture, masks. And then let's just set this up. So this is going to be deformation, and this is going to be drip. There we go. Of course, the hair over here on my avatar is a separate object that we didn't paint. So I'm just actually going to disable deformation and dripping on it completely. And there you go. This is how you create and use a texture mask using Substance. Have fun.